Joining us now from outside the King's estate is Sky News correspondent Shimon Freeman Powell. Also with us, MS Now international reporter Inez de la Cuetara, and our senior legal reporter Lisa Rubin, along with New York Times international correspondent Megan Spicia. Shimon, investigators have now spent hours searching the King's private estate where the former Duke of York has been staying. Do we know if Andrew is being questioned by police there, or has he been actually brought in for questioning? And what are the investigators focusing on?
Well, Sky News understands that Andrew Mountbatten Windsor was actually brought into a police station for questioning. Now, the location of that police station is still underway. We're still trying to find out where he has been taken. But as you said, the property here is currently being searched and has been searched from around 8 a.m. this morning. That's when we first saw those pictures emerging, photos of unmarked police cars entering this estate, as well as police officers as well gathering, starting their investigation. It was just a few hours after those photos emerged that Thames Valley Police confirmed the arrest of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, an arrest for misconduct in public office. Now, crucially, Thames Valley Police decided not to name him, not to publicly name him, but described him as being a man in his 60s from Norfolk being investigated. And of course, it didn't take long for those two things to be put together. Now, Sky News understands that this is linked to allegations that has emerged from those Epstein files. Sky News understands that it's specifically linked to Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's time as a working royal, specifically working as a UK trade envoy. Now, as I say, it's not clear where he has been taken, but there is still police activity here on Wood Farm, on the Sandringham estate, and we also understand that other properties too, his former property at the Royal Ledge, will also be investigated. There's also a police presence there, and of course here at Wood Farm, it was actually a temporary address. Andrew had only moved into this property a few weeks ago. The Sandringham estate is more famously known as the residence that the royal family come to at Christmas to spend time together. But of course, today we now know that it was the address that was searched this morning by police.
Shimon Freeman Powell, thank you so much, again, of Sky News. We appreciate that reporting. So, Lisa, help us understand, just help put in perspective the significance of the King's brother actually being arrested, not just asked to come in for some questioning.
Well, in the U.S., I'm not nearly as familiar with the British legal system, but let's just compare it to the U.S. In the U.S., when a person is arrested, it's because police have probable cause to believe that a crime was committed, and either they have to bring charges within a particular period of time, or charges have already been brought and they are under seal and the person is arrested to begin that criminal process. So the arrest and the significance of the arrest means that charges are likely imminent on it, as opposed to an ongoing investigation of a person that could proceed for weeks or months in which they're asked for their voluntary cooperation. Here, the arrest is a signal that charges may be imminent against Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
And hadn't the DOJ been trying to get Andrew to cooperate?
Yes, years ago. So when the Epstein and Maxwell investigations were happening in the Southern District of New York, that's the Manhattan office of the federal government's prosecutors, they had tried to get him to voluntarily come in for an interview and were involved in protracted negotiations with his counsel in the UK. Those eventually fell apart, and that's when the Department of Justice turned to diplomatic channels called a Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty to try and get Prince Andrew to involuntarily participate through legal process, to be compelled to give an interview. At the time, that caused a lot of diplomatic tension between the U.S. State Department and their parallel or corresponding folks in the UK that neither side really wanted to push. But at the time, the Department of Justice here in Manhattan, Jeffrey Berman, the U.S. attorney, gave a statement making very clear Prince Andrew had refused to voluntarily cooperate in June of 2020.
And now under arrest by authorities in the United Kingdom. Meghan, British officials have been aggressively investigating in at least the last few weeks since the latest Epstein files dropped. It is so different from the response here in the United States as far as any kind of law enforcement action. What do you make of that?
Yeah, so as you said, it's already sort of shaking up politics and now the royal family in the UK. So we saw Peter Mandelson, who was a former UK ambassador to the United States, being investigated for similar charges of misconduct of public office. And now, again, we're seeing Prince Andrew being investigated for the same thing. I think the interesting thing here is that, you know, he has been associated with Epstein for many years, and there's been a pretty clear awareness in the British public that there was, you know, a strong bond between the two men. As early as 2015, there were allegations of wrongdoing on his part. Today, what we're actually seeing this arrest focusing on, though, is this allegation of misconduct in public office. This is dating to his time working as a trade envoy for the UK government, which is an official posting. And while the Thames Valley Police, who are leading up this investigation, have not pointed directly to the documents that were pointing them toward a potential case of wrongdoing, we know that there are files in the latest tranche of documents linked to Jeffrey Epstein that point to potential confidential, emails being forwarded from the former Prince Andrew to Mr. Epstein. So yes, I do think it's being taken incredibly seriously here. We saw, just days after this latest tranche of documents being released, action, at least, optically, from the authorities here to really take some of these people to task. Last week, the Thames Valley Police said that they'd begun assessing an investigation. And then today, the shocking scenes this morning playing out at Sandringham State, that they had actually arrested Andrew Mountbatten Windsor.
Inez, let's talk more about this political fallout we've been seeing over there over the former ambassador's ties to Epstein. There were calls for Prime Minister Starmer to resign because he had appointed the ambassador. But this morning, before the arrest, we heard Starmer say no one is above the law. Will this arrest of a former prince help or hurt the prime minister in terms of how the public views him?
Yeah, so it's been really interesting to see the parallels between everything that's going on with the royal family and what happened at 10 Downing Street. So in the same way that the former Prince Andrew is believed to have leaked sensitive information to Epstein while he was trade envoy for the UK, over at Downing Street, the controversy was over Peter Mandelson, the former British ambassador to the US, who is also believed to have leaked sensitive information to Epstein while he was business secretary. And that scandal really engulfed 10 Downing Street. The British Prime Minister at one point really fearing for his political future. Two of his senior aides had to resign over this scandal. So really a big push for accountability here in the UK, whether it's, members of the royal family, elected officials. And we did hear Keir Starmer talking about that. And I will say he spoke to BBC, the breakfast show there. And this was before Prince Andrew, the former Prince Andrew, was arrested. But he did talk about how no one is above the law. And he is calling for anyone with information related to Epstein to come forward to testify. So he is calling for Andrew to testify both before UK officials and before the U.S. Congress. We know, of course, the U.S. Congress has asked Andrew to testify, but they have no way of actually compelling Andrew to testify. So in terms of whether this hurts or helps the British Prime Minister, I think in some ways the fact that two of his aides did resign over the scandal, I think people are appreciative that he kind of took accountability on that front. But of course, his opponents think he should be doing a lot more. And we'll see if maybe everything going on with Andrew renews calls for Keir Starmer to do more and take even more accountability.
Megan, talk to us about the wider York family. Andrew's ex-wife, Sarah Ferguson, their adult daughters, both with princess titles still, are all mentioned in the Epstein files. What's the status with them, and how does the public view them?
That's a really good question. So as you mentioned, the former Duchess of York, whose title was also removed at the time that the Duke of York, now Andrew Mountbatten Windsor's title, was removed, there were some pretty striking examples of her correspondence with Jeffrey Epstein in this latest tranche of documents. She had a recently launched charity called Sarah's Trust, which closed up shop last week amid all of these new allegations. I think what really startled the British public is the really close relationship that she also seemed to have with Jeffrey Epstein long after his 2008 conviction. Their daughters, Princess Beatrice and Princess Eugenie, are still working members of the royal family, albeit, you know, more minor members of the royal family. And interestingly, the public perception of the princesses who still retain their royal titles hasn't really been as damaged as their parents' reputation. And I don't think that there's been any allegation so far of wrongdoing on either of their part. So they have still maintained, you know, this public-facing connection with the royal family as working members of the royal family, and still seem to have a lot of public support that their parents don't.